There's something I need to talk about that happened in Cleveland yesterday, and it has nothing to do with a throw or a stat line or a depth chart update. Deshaun Watson walked past the assembled media without saying a word. No statement. No carefully constructed non-answer designed to keep his name in the conversation while revealing nothing. Just silence. And I want to sit with that silence for a moment before we get into everything else, because in the context of where this quarterback competition actually stands right now, what Watson communicated by saying nothing is more telling than anything he could have said with words. I've watched enough professional football environments to know that silence at a specific moment inside a live evaluation window is never just silence. It is never the neutral absence of information. It is information. When every interaction inside a professional football facility is being observed, processed, and accumulated by a coaching staff forming franchise-level judgments, the decision to disengage from a moment rather than step into it is itself a statement about your relationship with the competition you're in. Watson told that building something yesterday without opening his mouth, and the coaches, the evaluators, the people whose entire professional responsibility is forming accurate assessments of both quarterbacks competing for this starting job. They received what he communicated with complete clarity. You cannot unsend that kind of message once it's been delivered. Let me give you the full picture of what's actually developing in Cleveland, because the version most people are getting operates at the surface level when the dynamics that actually matter are running considerably deeper. Todd Monken did not take this head coaching job to manage a transitional situation at the quarterback position. He came to build something specific, a specific offensive identity, a specific philosophical foundation, a specific kind of player at the center of what he's constructing. Every roster decision his organization has made this offseason has been quietly encoding that vision for anyone willing to read it carefully. And Watson going silent at the exact moment when a competitor who genuinely wants this job would have stepped forward and claimed some ownership of the situation. That is not a small detail when you're trying to understand where this competition is actually heading. That is a window into Watson's authentic relationship with this evaluation right now. What Shedeur Sanders is doing, in direct contrast, deserves real attention, because I don't want to just throw out the comparison as a talking point without giving it the substance it requires. The consistent reports from that facility describe a quarterback approaching every single day with the kind of focused competitive urgency that cannot be performed for an audience and then switched off when nobody is watching. He is not managing appearances. He is preparing, locked into the daily process in a way that coaching staffs observe and accumulate as genuine evidence across weeks of evaluation. In competitions where the margin between two players can't be resolved by raw statistical performance alone, the competitor who moves toward pressure has a real and durable advantage over the one who manages his distance from it. One player in that building is leaning into every uncomfortable moment of this evaluation with everything he has. The other walked past the media in silence. You don't need an official depth chart announcement to understand what that contrast is communicating to the professionals evaluating both of them every single day. Now let me take you to what Monken's receiver additions reveal about the offensive architecture being assembled in Cleveland, because this is the piece the broader conversation hasn't fully processed, and it's the piece that matters most for understanding who is genuinely at the center of the offense being built. When Monken described Denzel Boston, the specific language he reached for was not accidental, and it was not generic coach speak applied to any new roster addition. Size, matchup difficulty, red zone presence. A player who loves to compete, whose improvement trajectory has been continuous, who brings the right kind of energy into a building trying to establish a specific competitive culture. Those words don't come out unless you have a clear picture of how a player fits inside a specific operational framework. That is an offensive mind. And Monken's entire professional identity was built around coordinating high-level offenses before this head coaching opportunity, describing a specific kind of target designed for a specific kind of quarterback operation. A large-framed receiver who creates genuine physical matchup problems in the red zone, who demands safety attention that repositions coverage resources away from the spacing available elsewhere in the formation. requires a quarterback who can identify that alignment quickly, process where the coverage advantage has been created before the defense rotates to eliminate it, and deliver the ball on schedule rather than waiting for something more comfortable and obvious to develop after the design structure has already collapsed. That is a timing-based operation at its core. It requires a quarterback who trusts his receivers to win their individual battles and commits to the throw before the window is fully resolved, not a quarterback who holds the ball while using his athleticism to create additional time for a more obvious target to emerge. That profile fits Shedeur Sanders in a way that is specific and documented and worth examining with real precision, rather than just asserting as a general observation. His game is built around processing speed and decision rhythm that are consistent across every competitive environment he's operated in. He sees the field quickly. He reads coverage with the accuracy and decisiveness that comes from genuine conceptual mastery of an offensive system rather than just familiarity with it. He delivers the ball to the location the route concept designates on schedule, which means the throw is confirming a decision that was already made rather than discovering the answer in real time. That operational style demands genuine system internalization. The timing only works when the quarterback's internal clock is fully synchronized with the route structure. And it is exactly the style that everything Monken has communicated about his offensive vision is being deliberately designed around. Watson's natural orientation runs in the opposite direction. And I want to be honest about this without allowing the sentimentality around his career history to distort the evaluation. Even before the injuries accumulated and everything complicated his situation, his instinct when the design structure didn't produce an immediate answer was to create outside it using his physical gifts. That produced moments of individual brilliance that almost nobody else in the league was capable of replicating. It also produced the kind of systematic inconsistency, the holding penalties when the extended play collapses, the turnovers when the improvised throw under pressure doesn't land where the scrambled route requires it, the offensive identity volatility that makes week-to-week execution difficult to build. That works directly against what a head coach whose stated philosophy is winning rather than just scoring is trying to establish as the organizational standard. Monken is not building an improvisation platform. He is constructing a rhythm and timing operation, and the quarterback best equipped to execute that operation is not the one who walked silently past the media yesterday. Casey Concepcion tells the same architectural story from a different position on the depth chart. Quick, sharp, consistently creating separation on short and intermediate routes, the specific receiver profile that becomes most genuinely dangerous in a system where the quarterback processes quickly and releases on timing rather than holding the ball while extended windows develop. You don't add two receivers with these specific and complementary profiles in the same offseason without a clear vision for how they function together within the offensive identity you're actively building. Conception's value comes from creating underneath and intermediate separation that pulls coverage resources in ways that open Boston's red zone matchups on the back end. Both of them require a quarterback who sees the field quickly, trusts the routing concepts completely, and releases the ball with the timing and placement those routes were specifically designed to exploit. The architectural logic of these acquisitions points consistently in one direction. Monken has been building this deliberately, and the quarterback the architecture is built around is not difficult to identify when you examine the evidence honestly. Monken's developmental philosophy reveals something critically important about where his staff's genuine investment is actually directed, and it's embedded in how he talked about what coaching staffs fundamentally owe to the players in their building. He was unambiguous. The job is to develop the players they have, to push each individual toward the genuine ceiling of their capability rather than simply managing what already exists and extracting whatever short-term performance is available. That is an orientation statement. And it carries real weight when you place it inside the context of this live quarterback competition. Watson at this stage of his career is not, by any honest assessment, a developmental project. He is a completed professional product operating from a decade of ingrained habits built across thousands of professional repetitions that aren't going to be substantially reshaped by any new coaching environment, regardless of how talented that staff is. What he provides is operational familiarity, the ability to manage a professional offense at a functional level without requiring foundational teaching investment. What he cannot provide is what Monken was actually describing, a player whose ceiling is genuinely unresolved, who is still actively becoming the full version of what he's capable of being, who can be shaped by real coaching investment into something meaningfully greater than his current form. That player is Shedeur Sanders, young enough, talented enough, and intellectually equipped enough to absorb a new system at a pace that exceeds what his raw professional experience level would predict. A coaching staff that defines its professional identity around player development is not making that statement with Watson in mind. It is describing its relationship with a quarterback who is still in the active process of being built. And the sustained investment required to build him correctly only happens when the people doing the building have genuinely committed to who they're building around. That commitment is visible in everything Monken has communicated publicly, in the roster decisions his organization has made, and in the philosophical framework he's articulated for what this team is trying to become. The offensive line situation adds another dimension that deserves direct examination, because Monken acknowledged openly that the center position remains an active question being worked through rather than a resolved one. That honesty is itself informative. A coaching staff willing to publicly acknowledge gaps is a staff building around a long-term vision rather than papering over short-term vulnerabilities with confident public language. And in that context, which quarterback actually fits the specific situation this team is operating within right now is a consequential question. Interior pressure, the kind that arrives unexpectedly through the center gap, creates a very specific disruption for quarterbacks. It comes from the direction they're already facing, which means it collapses the internal timing of the weight transfer before the throw, rather than arriving from the perimeter where the quarterback has more processing time to respond. A quarterback who releases the ball on timing is structurally better equipped to operate behind an interior line with uncertainty than one whose model requires extended pocket time for either the designed structure to fully develop or for improvised solutions to emerge after that structure has broken down. Watson's tendency to hold and extend actually compounds the exposure behind an imperfect interior line, because the extension creates more time for penetrating linemen to close rather than reducing it. Shedeur's processing speed and timing-based delivery mean the ball is frequently already out before the pressure from interior penetration can disrupt the pocket in the first place. In a specific situation where the center position is still being resolved, that is not a marginal competitive advantage. It is a structural one that accumulates across an entire season of snaps in ways that influence outcomes well beyond what any individual play would suggest. Monken's most revealing comment came when he drew the distinction between his identity as an offensive coordinator and his identity as a head coach. As a coordinator, he said, "You're responsible for scoring. As a head coach, you're responsible for winning football games." That gap is wider and more consequential than it might appear on the surface. Scoring produces numbers in individual games. Winning requires something more demanding and more consistent. Disciplined decision-making under real competitive pressure across a full season. The ability to protect the football when protecting it matters more than manufacturing the spectacular play. The situational judgment to choose the correct decision over the impressive one when those two options point in different directions. And the systematic execution that allows a team to be genuinely competitive week after week rather than brilliant and chaotic in unpredictable alternation. That philosophy demands a quarterback who plays within the structure he's been given, who makes the right decision rather than the highlight decision, who understands that sustained systematic execution across 17 games produces more wins than the individual moments that dominate the conversation, but don't consistently show up in the final score when the season is complete. Watson's game, even in his elite years before everything complicated his career, was never built around systematic discipline within structure as its primary operating principle. He was a playmaker, an improviser, a quarterback whose individual brilliance produced moments of genuine excellence that nobody else in the league was capable of generating on those same plays. That is a real and legitimate form of football excellence, and I'm not diminishing what he was capable of at his peak. But it is not what Monken described when he articulated his philosophy as a head coach. The commitment to winning over scoring, to systematic execution over improvised brilliance, is a commitment to a fundamentally different quarterback identity. And Shedeur Sanders embodies that identity in his operational framework more completely than Watson has ever operated within it, or is likely to now at this stage of his career, in this specific physical situation. What I keep returning to when I sit with all of this simultaneously is how many completely separate threads are telling exactly the same story at exactly the same time. The roster construction communicates who the offense is being designed around. The receiver additions communicate what kind of quarterback operation is being built and what it requires. The developmental philosophy communicates where the coaching staff's genuine investment is actually being directed. The philosophical distinction between scoring and winning communicates what kind of decision-maker this system needs at its center. And Watson's silence communicated something about his authentic relationship with this competition that no subsequent managed public engagement is going to fully overwrite in the minds of the coaches who observed that moment and understood immediately what it meant about where he is right now. These are not isolated data points that can be explained away individually when examined without context. They are a pattern, and patterns in football evaluation are more reliable than any single piece of evidence because they accumulate across time in ways that individual moments cannot replicate, and they reveal the underlying reality rather than the managed presentation of it. Shedeur Sanders did not need Watson to disengage to build his case for this starting job. He was already building it through daily competitive evidence, through visible engagement with every part of the preparation process, through the quality of consistent work that a coaching staff committed to genuine evaluation observes and records across weeks of real observation, without the filter of public narrative or historical reputation standing between them and what the evidence is actually saying. Watson's silence just removed the possibility that his experience at managing competitive impressions through strategically timed public moments could obscure the contrast between where both quarterbacks actually are. The formal announcement of what's already been decided inside that building is the only thing still pending. Everything else has been settled by the players themselves, through the choices they make and the choices they avoid, in the daily reality of a competition that the people who actually matter are watching with clear eyes and no obligation to protect anyone from what the evidence is showing them.